Ken, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, brother. Thanks for having me.
I'm excited. Just a little chit chat before. It sounds like we're going to have a lot of fun.
Exactly.
Not only have you actually produced your book, which mine is still in this purgatory phase, but I read the intro and I read a good part of the first part of your book, and I'm excited because it sounds like you got a lot of wisdom which comes from experience and
Comes from those scars, baby.
yeah, getting punched in the face. So
Yeah.
give us like the short version of your background and what you're doing now and how you got to here in your book, and then we can kind of go back and unpack it.
Yeah, for sure. So I started like yourself. I came up in an entrepreneurial family in the grocery industry. My dad had grocery stores my entire life, and then when I was 17, he and I kind of veered off in the grocery industry in what's called an arbitrage business. And so we started buying and selling truckloads of groceries, basically on the gray market, right, where we could effectively a manufacturer was either they've got excess inventory or looking to gain market share, whatever the case may be. They would go into some markets and discount an item heavily. We would come in behind them and scoop it up and buy as much of it as we possibly could, and then turn around, put it on a truck, and go ship it into other markets where they weren't selling it at a discount. And that little business, by the time I was 23, we were doing $50 million a year. By the time I was 28, I was running. He had retired, so I was running an $800 million a year company. By the time I was 30, it was 1.8 billion and was the seventh largest privately held company in the state of Florida. And then, as fate would have it, March 14th of 2000, I got into a run-in with my partners, walked out of there in a huff, pissed off, and decided I was going to go and basically rebuild everything and do it on my own terms, and where I didn't have partners, et cetera, and spent the next 2 years floundering around and trying to compete with my much larger former partners, and between lawsuits and bad decisions, effectively lost everything over a course of about a little less than 2 years. And to say that was humbling would be putting it very mildly. But ultimately, it led me into real estate, right? I mean, basically, I had burnt every relationship, burned every bridge, burned every opportunity down in that industry. Like I said, I was just floundering, trying to figure things out. And late night infomercial one night, watched some guy talking about flipping houses, went to one of those events, went in there and quickly figured out that what he was talking about when it came to flipping houses was very, very similar. There were a lot more similarities than not in what I had just been doing in groceries. And so I gravitated to it, made a $1,000 investment, and considering I only had $4,000 in the bank, it was some pretty scary stuff. And after 2 years of bad financial decisions, I didn't even trust myself to make that one. But it changed my life, man. I got really into the business, got very excited about it. It's been 18 years now that I've been doing it, and flipped over 6,000 houses, my family runs one of the largest and most successful single family home real estate investment companies in the country now, and manages over 6,500 properties in 7 different markets, about to be 8. And again, along that way, I kind of found what my real passion was, and that was showing other people exactly how we do what we do, basically breaking down the processes, breaking down and making it as simple as I possibly could for just about anybody to achieve what they wanted to achieve. I mean, I feel very, very fortunate that I was never really passionate about buying and selling houses. What I was really passionate about was the entrepreneurial journey,
Mm-hmm.
showing people that stuff really can happen. And so, so now we sit here today, and my book is coming out, and I've got about I had about 60,000 students over the last 12 years of the education company. We have about 30,000 people that use our software every month. And so, like you said, the rest is kind of history. It's one of those things where I never expected to be where I am, but I'm glad I'm here.
I'm super excited. And the thing that I've been wanting with this show over the years, it's just people that have done it, right? Like, I mean, it's so funny because Ken, when we were about to sell the business, I was going through what am I going to do? Like, I'm running this business, but then I'm like essentially going to be carving out my own job. So then I actually sat in a short sale presentation, and I went to the Rich Dad Poor Dad coaching. I've dropped like $8,000 on that, and like I ended up getting detoured into now here I am on the opposite side of working on the business side of it. But totally saw it. But there's so much fake stuff going on. Just a lot of window dressing in the real estate, and the fact that you've done it, and say the name of your book because I'll say it in the intro, obviously, but I love it.
I mean, the name says it all, right? The name of the book is This Shit Works, right?
I love it. I love it. Right? It's not fake. You do it, and it works. So,
Yeah, I mean, there's like, to your point, there's a lot of fluff and BS out there in the industry, and unfortunately, this is an industry like many others that doesn't escape that, right? And there's a lot of people that are the dream stealers that have no problem selling all the nonsense and making it seem like it's a lot harder than it's got to be. And we're all about keeping it very straightforward, very simple. This business is not easy, but I can tell you it is very simple. I mean,
mhm.
it is not complicated.
So there's a couple things that I think we can really dive into here. One is, we can go in whatever order you want for the listeners. I mean, they're used
Sure.
to this, but the challenges that you went through when you were actually going through the business, and the challenges of your partners, and then just that whole emotional stuff of going through that, and that trying to reinvent yourself. I've had so many people on, Ken, over the years, hundreds of people that are just like, they go through that and they're like, who am I? What am I? In your intro in the book, you talk about building a business around your purpose. And that's
Mhm.
actually of our 5 principles in our framework. It's figure out what the hell you want and
Right.
then build everything else around it. So I'm curious about that journey. But then also, the second part is the how you scaled it outside of you. You talked about trading dollars for hours and in your book in the intro, and I think that's something a lot of people struggle with, regardless of whether they're in a service business or they're trapped. And we talk a lot about this shift in mindset, Ken, of shifting away from annual incomes to distributions and annual income to long-term value creation. Once that
Right.
shift happens, it's about allocating capital, and your mind, everything changes around that. And then the third thing I want to make sure we touch on is what you actually do in real estate, because I think I could probably geek out with you on like how that's changing with the pandemic and
Sure.
monetary policy. So
Yeah.
whatever
So let's start.
direction you
Let's
want to go,
start.
man.
Let's just knock them down. So the very first thing I would talk to you about is yeah. I mean, I feel very very fortunate, one, to have the experience of building of being a part of building a wildly successful company, right, at a very very early age. And a lot of that had to do about being raised in an entrepreneurial family, for sure, right? So I was getting my PhD in what it took to work hard and figure out how to make things happen at an extremely young age. And so, when most guys my age, 22, 23 years old, was trying to figure out what they were going to do when they got out of college, I was already running a $50 million a year company, right? All my buddies
Good luck
went to college.
relating to your buddies, right?
They all went to college and they came back and worked for me. And so I never went. And so that was an amazing experience. But it also, losing it and ultimately being, effectively run out of my baby at that point was one of the best and worst things that ever happened to me. When I was in it, I had no idea, how fortunate I really was and what ultimately the outcome would be, 20 years later. When I was in it, it was desperation, it was despair, it was a divorce of something I had invested 13 years of my life in blood, sweat, and tears. First one in the office every day. I was the douchebag who took so much pride in getting to the office at 5:30 in the morning, not leaving until 8:30 at night. Loved it, right? Thought wore it as a badge of honor that I was the hardest working guy in the place and would drive harder than anybody. And it ultimately, created or was part of the creation of a really, really successful company. Now, doing all that is cool, but doing it at the expense of everything else that truly matters isn't so cool. And I was too young and naive, and I was only a product of what I had, of what I was. I didn't have any of the wisdom at that point. I was, like I said, I was in my 20s, was married, had a young son, and quite frankly, just putting it candidly, nothing mattered except for me to continue to be successful. And I justified all of that with, oh, I'm doing it for them. I'm doing it for them. I'm doing it for them. Right? None of that is true. That's the story we tell ourselves
Hmm.
to justify, doing all this stuff that we do. But none of that is true if you're just being honest. And I can tell you firsthand.
Well, there's a couple of things in your book that you probably said shed some light on, like why you now have this recalibration. But I'm curious, before we get into the why you changed, I'm curious if you have reflected back, Kent, and said, why were you focused on that? Was it affirmation that you were looking after, or
I mean,
motive?
being raised by an entrepreneurial father, right?
Yep.
Specifically, that father-son relationship is what it is. I'm
Yep.
no therapist, but I can tell you that that's probably as big of it as any. Just trying to make sure that I was doing right by my father and trying to continue to impress him and show him that not only that I was worthy, but ultimately that I was better than him. And that it's a huge driving force. And so especially in a guy like me, entrepreneurial, there's definitely an entrepreneurial
DNA.
chromosome in there that when you got it, right, you've got it. And it's just a driver. It's just down in your gut. You don't know why it is, but it seems perfectly natural to push harder than anybody else around you thinks is logical. And I'm that guy through and through. And in your 20s, when that's being fueled, quite frankly, because everything you're doing is successful, that's part of the problem too, right? So I'm as I'm doing things, I am clearly seeing the rewards. The business is growing, double digits year over year over year over year. Some years triple digits. I'm making more money than most people make in a lifetime. I'm making in a year, and I'm 25, 26, 27 years old. I've got all the toys, all the luxury items. Like, you name it, I had it. Right, the cars, the watches, the house on the water, the whole thing down in South Florida. And so you kind of just become you just kind of start believing your own BS. And you start feeding into this mythological character that you've helped to create. And I believed I was invincible. I believed that I couldn't fail. I believed that I was God's gift to this business. I believe and so you become that thing. And before you know it, and by the way, I don't begrudge anybody that. And I don't even look back on myself and say I'm ashamed of that guy. That I
Is that
simply didn't know any better.
but is that, and you're not ashamed of it? Is that because of where you are today?
Correct. I mean,
I think,
here's the reason why I'm not ashamed, because I had to be that guy in
yeah.
order to appreciate the guy I am now.
And I think you just tapped into, we need to capture that and like savor on that, because too many times when I've had people on the show, Ken, is they're past their prime, or they're like 70 when that happens, and they sell, and then they're like, holy shit, I wish I woulda. And I think you have some of your stories in your book that kind of share that. We're like, as long as you got enough time to, because it's relativity. We only appreciate what we don't have until we've seen the other side, right? So I think it's really crucial.
It's really hard to appreciate the light without the dark, right?
Yep.
And
Yep.
so, and I had no idea that was dark. I mean, to me, it was like I said, I was living a very big life. Money was not an issue. I had everything.
Mm-hmm.
Challenge of it is the moment that the hiccup hit, and we started going toe to toe, and suddenly it was gone, and I walked out of there on March 14th. My life changed almost immediately. I still had the money, but all the relationships, friendships, everything that was tied into that business, it wasn't a divorce from one person. It was a divorce from 600 people all at the same time, going into a massive depression. Not having any place to turn. When it came to,
it's crazy, isn't it?
Do I go and go toe to toe and compete against these guys? No, I'm going to go try to get some of their employees. Let me go try to get their customer. I mean, it's just a cyclone effect that you have no idea that you're really in until you get all the way down to the bottom, and you're like, oh wow, this is not good, right? And I was in a really, really bad spot. I mean, I was suicidal. I mean, that's exactly where I was. I was in a very, very dark spot. I just wanted it to stop. I was drowning. Could not figure out a way to get out. And
isn't it crazy too, kind of, when it's like it's financial, it's like emotional, it's relationships, it's community. That there was a guy on my podcast that he said, when you sell a business and your identity is that, it's like you're surgically removing it.
100%.
And there was a woman, she's got a PhD in business psychology, and she said that there's something actually called role identity infusion. And it's just like,
Right. Yeah, I mean, it was the trauma of it was it took me several years to recover that, emotionally. But like I said, it put me it taught me, I'll back up. There's a great commencement address by Steve Jobs to Stanford, right? The speech that's on YouTube. If nobody ever watched it, I would tell you to go watch this. But one of the things he says is extremely profound. He says, you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking back. And nothing, I mean, it's so true. Like, at that point, I had no idea, I'm grasping at straws, just trying to figure it out. I had no idea how big of a milestone, a dot that really would be in my life. Now, looking back, it's the greatest thing that ever happened to me.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I didn't feel like that at the time, but when I look back on it, I'm like, I needed that wake-up call. I needed that hit in the mouth. I had never failed. I had never fallen down. I had never experienced any kind of rough patch. I had never been humbled, right? And so to get knocked down as far, not only professionally, but personally in that entire endeavor was good for me. I needed that, right? I needed that humility, because ultimately, like you said earlier, Now, looking back, and the guy that I needed to get out of that headspace to become the guy that I've become.
What was the
Uh,
hardest part about that phase?
the despair, like not understanding where to turn next. It's a really frustrating place to be. Like you're just grabbing at anything and everything, and especially when at that point you got to keep in mind my experience was I'm not college educated. I've never worked for anybody but myself. Right? I'm 30 years old. I've been very very successful, but I've been in one very niched out industry. And so I was a big fish in a relatively small pond, right? This is a $5 billion a year industry, and I'm running a $1.8 billion a year company. We are 40% of the entire market, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so I'm kind of untouchable. I'm one of those guys, non-competes, can't go here, can't kind of feeling that, what do I do, right? That's a really, really frustrating situation to be in. But like I said, it ultimately turned me and backed me into a corner where, in that grasping for straw, phase, I grabbed onto real estate. And once I understood something about it, the basics of some of the concepts that I teach today, I was off to the races. I got my passion back, and I was running, and I ran hard.
So,
Um,
what I find interesting, and I want to understand too, is as you went to that after you acted on that infomercial, and as you started to, when you said you got your passion, you started to run hard. You used one of my favorite words in your intro. You intentionally sort of designing everything around this, right?
right.
And so, what did you learn, and then how did you create, whether it was core principles, whether they were articulated or not? How did you identify what you were going to focus on?
I
In
was all of it was circumstantial. I would love to tell you that I was smart enough to come back and say, "Hey, I got this big master plan." This is not the way it happened, right? What happened was I was desperate. I wanted to make money. I wanted to get back on top, and so I flipped. Once I found something where that I could actually do and prove to myself I could do it, I flipped on the hustler mode. We've all been in that mode as an entrepreneur. It's kind of the first phase. You got to go through it. So I became the biggest hustler you've ever seen. I mean, I did 91 deals, made over $1 million in my first 18 months in this business. Like I was crushing. But kind of going to your second question, about 2 years in, I quickly realized I didn't own a business. I owned a job, and that was a real gut punch for me. I had gotten remarried, and my wife was pregnant. A little girl was on the way, and here I am grinding, flipping houses. We're making plenty of money, back on track. But the moment I stopped flipping houses, the cash register stopped singing. And that was a big, big aha for me. And it sounds very obvious now, but it wasn't to me. And so I became really, really dedicated to, I want my life to be different. I know I have the capability to outwork anybody and make things happen, period. That's just who I am. But I knew what that got me in my previous life. So I had that experience to say, well, I did that for 13 years and built an empire and lost it virtually overnight. And in the process of losing it, lost everything else that mattered to me. I'm not doing that again. So I had this fear over my shoulders. What would happen if I lost everything again? If it all melted away, what would happen again? Well, the one thing I kept going back to is that, well, at least I know I'll have my wife and my kids, and I can do anything. I've proven I can get back on top. So I have the relationships, this core group around me, and this extremely powerful bond. Then I'm armed with everything I need. They cannot take away my knowledge. They can't take away my drive, and then they can't take away my family. I
Mhm.
got this, right? And so I became very, very intentional about, I'm going to scale this. I'm going to put it in, I'm going to put systems and processes and automation in place to do this, but I'm going to do this to where it does one thing. It makes me a better husband, a better father, a better man. It doesn't in any way, shape, or form trap me in this business, because I'm trapped right now. And so I just went on a mission. Ironically, I kind of had an epiphany in that, and because I became very passionate about, how do I make it simple? How can I teach this to somebody else to do? Because if I can't do that, then I'm going to be a slave to this business forever.
Well, it's so interesting too, like in because I want to make sure you continue on your train of thought, but like a little comment on that, Ken, is like what you and I were talking about, the annual income to long-term value creation, where I see so many people, regardless of the size too, like you're talking about. I mean, we're just pure energy and forcing and willing it into being is this. I mean, I grew up in copier sales, right? So you're doing arbitrage, but like same shit, right? Like you're just
Yeah.
through pure effort, you'll get there. But at some point it's relying on you, your energy, your relationship. Like you said, you're stuck. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs deal with that. But like when you shift, you're like, okay, well, I have to invest to get out. And I think that's where like this challenge of like, people's lifestyle, they've overdone the lifestyle with toys and different things. And they're like, well, I can't really invest, or do I want to? And their like risk appetite is different. And there's no need to shift and make that investment like you're talking
Well,
about.
the problem in that, or the challenge of that, is that they think they are a business owner and they think they are an entrepreneur. And I would argue very seriously that they're not.
It's
That what they are is they own a job, which is fine, but it's real simple to figure out if you own a job or not. Just stop working. Just leave. Go on vacation for 2 months, and if you come back and there's more money in your bank account than when you left, then you probably own a business. If there's not, then your ass owns a job. And it's very simple. And if you don't want to own a job, then you clearly have to understand that you're going to have to think differently, make different decisions, and use leverage. There's no two ways about it. Leverage comes in all shapes and sizes, right? I mean, it's leveraging other people, it's leveraging financial leverage, there's leveraging systems, operations, other people's wisdom, other people's insight. It doesn't matter, right? But if you can't, be honest with yourself and understand that the decisions you make today as this hustler, and that you really just own a job, then you're going to be trapped there forever. You got to have a really hard conversation with yourself and like, I don't want to own a job. I want to actually own a business. I want to be able to spend time with my kids, do the things I want to do, travel the world, and have more money come in than when I'm, in the office.
And that could be any size company too, Ken. I mean, like,
It doesn't
I've
matter.
watched, you've probably seen big companies that are the same way, where they might have an executive team, but it's still the case. Or like a really crazy example is I've gotten some exposure into the Amazon e-commerce world. What a lot of these Amazon FBA sellers, I'm like, they're literally essentially doing the arbitrage that you were
Right.
doing, but
Right.
like it's just on Amazon, and they're making shitloads of money. And you're
Right.
like, yeah, just because you have 3 million in EBITDA, you have no company. Like
Right.
you don't have a company. Like I don't know
Right.
what else to say about that. And the goal is just like hopefully someone's gonna. It's like the relay race, and at
Yeah.
some point the music stops.
Right. Right. I mean, and again, there's nothing wrong with that, right?
You're aware of it.
As long as you clearly, your eyes wide open. I clearly understand what I'm doing. I'm not creating value. I'm creating income, which
Mhm.
is two very different things. And I'm not building assets. I'm making money. And again, call a spade a spade. If you're doing that, you're better than 99% of the people out there in the free world that
Yeah,
have to
there's nothing. Yes.
have to go work for somebody else, and they are not in any kind of control of their own income. God bless you. You are killing the game.
Yes.
But,
No.
but there is a huge difference between that and owning a business.
Hmm.
And if you want a business, then you're going to have to think differently. You got to get out of that mindset that, oh, nobody's going to do it as well as I'm going to do it. You got to get in that mindset, got to get out of that mindset of, have any kind of risk aversion to investing in marketing, investing in systems, investing in operations. I mean, you got to start thinking like a real entrepreneur, somebody who's trying to build an asset, build real value. You have to surround yourself with people that are really smart, which means you're going to have to invest in them, invest in yourself. Those things are very scary things for people to, people, whether they're joining a mastermind or they're getting a business coach or whatever, they have this, oh my God, why would I ever do that? Why wouldn't you? I mean, if you had it figured out, you wouldn't be, you wouldn't be where you are. You don't have it
You
figured
would be
out.
asking the question, right?
Right. So the very first thing you want to do is go find the person that's going to answer the question for you and is going to take you by the hand and figure out how, help you get to where you're trying to get to. It's really straightforward.
So now that you're saying that, like, what going back to your where you were in that journey, and you made this decision, because super awesome insights, by the way. That was very awesome. Like, what did you? Because did you hire a coach? What did you do other than like now you have this internal truth that you
I
understand?
basically decided that something I had been doing in the grocery industry, that when going back to that story for a second, I was running, the company was basically, when I was 26 to 27, was roughly doing about $90 million a year. And we had a company approach us out of Boca Raton, Florida. I was in Memphis, Tennessee at the time. And they came in and bought our company. And when they bought us, wasn't soon after that they effectively threw the keys of the larger company to me and said, "We want you to run our $800 million company now," right? And so here I am, a naive kid from Memphis, Tennessee, born and raised in Dallas, but lived in Memphis for 10 years. And I like the Beverly Hillbillies. I go down to Boca Raton, Florida. You talk about a fish out of water. It was like night and day. And I'm walking in this door and was just confident and cocky enough and just full of, enough to come in there and say, look, this is the way we're going to start doing stuff now. And one of the things that I basically asked everybody, because in that business, the way that model works is you sell or you're selling products that are being offered to you every day by grocery stores all across the country. Hey, today we got a truckload of Peter Pan or whatever, right? And so everybody's effectively, all of our competitors, we're all competing with the same truck of Peter Pan. This guy sent it to 20 guys like me. Yep. All 20 are picking up the phone, and we're all calling the other same customers on the other end saying, hey, Wegmans, do you want to buy it? What about you, 7-Eleven? What about you,
40,000 peanut butter jars? Let's do this.
And so if you think about it at a macro level, what effectively is happening is it's a race to zero. Who can afford to pay the most for that truck, and who's going to take the least, and who's going to squeeze their margins the most and get the deal done? That's who's going to win. And that business sucks. And so I basically...
You simply stated it. That business, exactly.
And so I basically went out and said, listen, guys, how about we go ask every single one of our customers that buy millions of dollars from us every week, if I could sell you anything at any price, delivered in any quantity on any day, what do you want to buy? And just work backwards. Let's just go figure out exactly what they would prefer to spend money on versus what we're trying to shove down their throats. And that very simple concept took the company in 30 months from 800 million to 1.8 billion.
Wow.
Because suddenly we were playing a completely different game. What we were doing was shopping and creating opportunities for our customers, effectively had purchase orders in hand, while all of our competitors were competing over the same dog shit that they're trying to sell to everybody. And then we just weren't doing that.
Well, and I'm curious as you go into the third question I originally asked about your business model now, which we can get there in a sec, but like cash flow has so much to do. I don't know how that model changed the cash flow of the business too.
It didn't change the cash flow dramatically, but it created massive efficiencies.
Okay,
because that particular business, we prepaid for everything, right? So we basically had to wire the money for a truck, $50,000, $100,000 at a time. I mean, we had days we were wiring $50 million, right? And we wire the money in, it sits there for 24 hours. We come pick the truck up, then we deliver it to a customer, and we get paid in 20 days. Mm-hmm. So nothing really changed.
At least the mental difference, right? Of like knowing that you already have the PO versus going, I bought this.
From an efficiency standpoint, I mean, we suddenly became a machine. We became McDonald's, right? I know what every customer wants every day. I'm just going to deliver it to them.
Yep. Way more efficient.
And so that was going into, your question about what was kind of the big light bulb moment inside of the real estate space was when I realized I could do the same thing in real estate. When I got really passionate and intentional with trying to put these processes and systems and efficiency in the business where I didn't have to be there, I needed to make it simple. And there's not anything much simpler than if I just know exactly what somebody wants to buy and I just go create it. I mean, that gets pretty simple. Most people are taught just go, quote unquote, find a deal, right? Let me go find a house. Somebody wants to sell their house at a discount. And then magically, when I go buy it at a discount and I go put it out on the internet, somebody's going to come to me and say that they're willing to pay my price. And that's basically what is taught in this industry still today, right? And I don't teach that. That's not my philosophy at all. I teach what's called reverse wholesaling. And basically what I figured out in that process is that the very first step in that is I needed to go find out who all the customers really were. And I did not know at the time that roughly 35% of all real estate transactions in the single family home market were being done with cash. And this has been a statistic that's been around for 20 years. And it only grows through a recession, right? When credit tightens up, cash buyers just become a bigger percentage of all the transactions. And so as fate would have it, this was like 2005, 2006, I figured out that cash buyers really mattered. And I went down to the county clerk's office in Broward County, Florida, and started figuring out that if I would go and look at all of the transactions that had been recorded the week before, all the deeds that had been transferred. And if I could find the deeds where there was not a mortgage recorded, well, then the only way that they could have paid for that deal was through cash.
Hmm.
And so I started creating a database and I started marketing to them. And I started saying, if I could sell you anything at any price in any market, what do you want? And it just worked. Before I knew it, I had hundreds of investors that I just became this guy that would, hey, I know you want to buy this house for houses like this for $250,000 in this neighborhood, 3 bedroom, 2 bath, 2,200 square feet. You can rent it for $3,000 a month. So my job became real simple. If I know you want to buy 10 houses like that the next 30 days, well, I'm just going to go market like crazy in that neighborhood and go find something that's less than $200,000, right? Because if I can pick it up, I'm going to make the spread.
Yep.
If I can buy it for 150, you're telling me you want to pay two, I'm going to make that 50 grand pop over and over and over. And that became the beginnings of, I mean, I was highly motivated to spend time with my daughter. I was highly motivated to spend time with my family. I wanted to create something that was I could teach anybody to do. And it doesn't get much easier when a cash paying customer that wants to buy 10 houses at a time for investment will sit there and tell you, I will pay this price in this neighborhood, this many bedrooms, this many bath. It's pretty straightforward business from that point forward, right?
Was it finding the people that were willing to sell?
Well, now, I mean, we've made that infinitely easier. At the time, I already had that piece figured out, right? Because what I had realized, keep in mind, I'd already been flipping houses for about 3 years or 2 years when this was going on. I knew that if I focused on people that were in tough situations, that I could solve their problem. And I'll give you an example. There's unfortunately nobody gets out alive. Every single one of us is going to die, right? And so, believe it or not, when people die and their house passes to their heirs in many, many, many cases are highly motivated to get rid of it, right?
Give me the money.
Give me the money, get rid of the house. We need to split the cash between all the heirs, the kids, and whatever else. And so I started focusing on, anybody that had recently passed away. Sounds kind of morbid, but man, not hard to look in the paper and figure that out. Any divorce filings, anybody that was behind on payments. I started figuring out that I could use data. And keep in mind, this was 15 years ago, right? I started figuring out that
come by.
yeah, I could figure out that I could use data to figure out where people were in certain situations, and I would market to them using direct mail to figure out to get them to pick up the phone and call me. So now I had both pieces of the puzzle. I had a ravenous cash buyer database sitting over here, and I knew exactly how to go create the deals, and the business exploded. Talk about scale. I mean, we went from 100 to 300 houses virtually overnight. When the recession hit, the Great Recession of 2008 to 2011, most of my competitors got completely ran out of the business, as did most real estate investors. Our business only doubled and tripled through that because I didn't need banks. I'm serving up to people who cares about credit. Didn't even matter. And so that was a lucky break right there. And it's kind of what ultimately put me into where, the training and coaching and masterminds and software, all those businesses came out of that moment right there because people were like, man, whatever you're doing and you're so successful through the recession, can you please teach us? Right. And nothing I'd ever considered.
So when that happened, and so when you go from 100 to 300 houses and you have this uptick of volume, what did you do to scale the operations then? So because you said your motive was to spend time with your wife and your daughter to have a more, integrated entrepreneurial life. What did you do to systematize what you were doing?
Well, it was a family ordeal, first off, right? So my family at this point, what I figured out that I was flipping houses down in Florida and I was really successful at it, wholesaling these houses, right? What we also started to figure out is as the market started tightening up, we could sell to cash investors who were looking for a place to put their money to work. I mean, when the market's doing this, this slow and steady looks pretty sexy, right?
Yes, it does.
And so I started bringing investors back into Memphis, Tennessee, believe it or not, right? And so my dad was back in Memphis, Tennessee. I started bringing investors back there, and we started selling them cash flow properties in Memphis, Tennessee, and ultimately managing those properties, managing the whole thing. And like I said, now we manage 6,500 houses for our investors, fast forward 15 years later. And so we did all that through people and through organic growth. I mean, it wasn't like we went and wrote some software program. We just knew that if all else fails, get people that really are passionate about your mission, not about the job, right? Not a warm body. I want somebody who believes as strongly as I do in what we're trying to accomplish. And by the way, the mission was very simple, was we want to help people create real wealth in real estate, and we make it easy for them. I want to solve all their problems. I want to go buy a property. I want to be able to serve it up to them on a silver platter. I don't want them to have to do anything to get the outcome they're looking for. And so, how did we do it? We did it through people, and then eventually through systems and automation. And then, now you look at where we are today. It's a amazingly successful business that has all the, the makings of what you would think from a corporate kind of
Yep.
entity now. But it wasn't like that when we started. It wasn't even close to that, right?
What were some of the like, have you ever read the book The Goal? And they talk about constraints. It's a manufacturing book. Go like all it is like you always are focusing on the biggest bottleneck, because when you open that up, you'll find the next bottleneck.
Mm-hmm.
People and systems and automation. You kind of referred to those three. And was there like big ahas, or like when you did something, whether it was intentional or not, where you're like, holy shit, did that open up like the ability to do bigger volume?
Well, I've experienced it. I've built 11 companies now, and I can tell you that in all of them, I'll give you my answer based off of all of them,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Not on one. And so, probably the biggest ahas that I've had through all of my companies has been I am the bottleneck. First off, right? And so when I started hiring people that were a lot smarter than me, it changed everything. I think most people, when they start hiring, for one reason or another, they think they're hiring for like, McDonald's. They're trying to find the lowest common denominator to put behind the cash register. And that is just not what you do if you're trying to scale a business. You want to hire people that scare you. You want to hire people that it's uncomfortable to pull the trigger on, that you're going to have to compensate well, and they're going to come with a big resume. They're going to come with a lot of knowledge and wisdom, and they're going to challenge you to push ahead. That was a huge deal for me, being the kind of individual that I am. When I started hiring people that were really smarter than me, it just my everything changed for me. Everything.
How did you get over that? Do you have an example or a person that you
Just
have?
getting over myself, putting my ego to the side, which is challenging, but understanding that I say this a lot, and it's just the way I see the world. You get a choice every day. You get to focus. You can either focus on the opportunity, or you can focus on the obstacle. And if you find yourself hesitant on things, you're probably in all likelihood focused on the obstacle. And then in that particular case, the obstacle was my ego, my pride. It was me basically saying, well, yeah, but I can't do this because then they're not going to do X, Y, or Z, right? And the opportunity, when you take a step back and realize, one, now I'm building something that is potentially sellable. Now I've got people that are highly trained in driving the company without me. Now I have the opportunity to go spend more time and with my family and friends. Now I get to go and travel the world and collect moments with my kids that I could never get back, right? That opportunity is much greater than the obstacle. So it's, again, pushing the ego to the side and forgetting about I don't need to be the CEO. I don't need to be the guy. I have no problem being the shareholder behind the scenes. It's just getting rich,
Mhm.
no problem. And so,
In that, out of the 11 companies and out of the people that the key employees, I went through this. I know a lot of people. I mean, I've seen it so many times. Did you get to the point where, like, did any of those people that scared you, that asked for big comp plans, did you ever give some sort of equity? Where, because like a couple questions out of this kind of is like, there's a point where like, okay, regardless of whether you're 100 grand in cash flow or millions of dollars in cash flow, that next level of people, they usually understand finance like you and I are talking about. They're going, okay, got it. But guess what? I understand what this is worth. I understand the future value, what I'm going to create. How is this going to work? So either they understand it and they're asking for it, or you can't afford them. So then that equity upside becomes
right.
a way of making it. Did you have
I've
any?
done it in the last two or three companies I've done. I've definitely done that in my executive team, and allowing them to vest over 3 or 5 years,
Yeah.
right? Never huge chunks of equity, right? You're talking about single digit percentage points, but it ties them closer to me. I remember where I was, and the reason why I ultimately walked out of that company, back in the day, was because it was all over equity. And so I want people to want to be here, and I want to compensate them well. If I'm compensating them well, and they have goals and objectives that they're trying to achieve personally, and they can do that through my company, that's a good place for me, right?
Mhm.
I think probably more than that, what people have a tendency, at least in my experience, what I've seen, what people struggle with is, giving up the control, giving up, not empowering the people, having to micromanage people, sitting over their shoulder, not allowing. And when you hire better people than you, that's just not even it's impossible to do that because they won't allow it, right? If you hire, they're not going to let you micromanage, or you're going to run them out, and you're going to be much worse off for it. So if you find yourself where you feel like you need to have your thumb on everybody, then that's a clear indication that you don't have the right people around you, at least in my opinion. I
Or you're
like,
not capable of letting the right people come around.
yeah, one or the other, right? Either way, you're losing.
Yeah, totally agree.
And so that was a huge, huge aha for me in my life when I understood that completely, and embraced it and decided that that would be the way that I would start building, was just surrounding myself with wildly expensive but worth it people, right? People that brought so much value that by the time they were done in their first year or 2 years, or we got to that place, I shouldn't say done, but by the time we got to that place, the investment seemed silly. It
Yeah.
seemed,
Did you ever have any of those people where it didn't work out?
of course.
Thank
Are
you
you
for the
kidding me?
real. That's yeah. Why didn't it work out, and what ended up happening?
I mean, look, if you don't run into challenges in your business, including hiring and training and firing challenges, you're just not trying hard enough, right?
Yeah.
You're not taking enough swings. Yeah, I mean, as I've gotten older, have we put systems and hiring processes in place to try to weed out any of that kind of stuff? I mean, we use personality tests and profile tests to understand exactly who we're trying to put in the right seats at the right time. I mean, we do everything we can to hedge, but it is what it is. It's definitely going to happen at some point. We all are unique creatures. I'm extremely passionate. I'm extremely driven. I know what I'm trying to accomplish in my life. I'm not necessarily the easiest guy in the world to work for if you're not the right person inside of my organization. If I'll share this with you too. One of the most valuable things that I learned probably about 10 years ago was to get extremely dialed in on what I actually stand for, what I stand against, why I'm doing what I'm doing, and what I really, really believe in so passionately that I'm willing to go to the mat for it, right? And learning to express that in everything I do. So my core values are so ingrained in just my personality, right? So if you see me online, you see me on videos, Facebook, YouTube, whatever the case may be, it's real easy to understand what my style is. It's real easy to understand that what my delivery is going to be. It's really easy to understand the way that I'm just I don't believe in sugarcoating things. I just want to tell you exactly. I'm driven, and I want to drive you. Why that was so powerful for me is because what I started to realize is that whether it's my customers, whether it's my partners, whether it's my colleagues, employees, whatever, if I'm putting anything else out there, then I'm not being authentic. I'm attracting people to me that don't understand who I actually am. And so it's a major rub when somebody comes behind the curtain, they realize that, oh my God, you're not who I thought you were. Right. And so about 10 years ago, I had a mentor break it down for me because I used to be a guy, when I got into this space and I was really good at teaching people how to do this. Of course, now all of a sudden I become a national speaker. I'm all over the country and I'm getting on other people's stage and Rich Dad, Poor Dad and all this stuff. And I'm suit and tying it all day long. And I'm watching every word I say. I don't use any foul language. And by the way, none of that is who I am.
The only reason I'm laughing is because I can relate to that so much.
Yeah, that's not who I am, right? I am a 50-year-old guy that lives 500 yards away from my office in La Jolla, California. I ride a skateboard to work. I wear flip-flops every day. I cuss like a sailor. I tell you exactly like it is. And quite frankly, if you don't like me, I don't give a shit. And so that's who I am. And so you can imagine when somebody's coming into my world and they think I'm this suit and tie button-up guy and they really get behind the scenes, it doesn't work. And so I ditched it. I was like, if you want me to speak and you want me to come in, this is how it's going to look. This is who I am. And if you have a problem with it, then don't invite me. And I started communicating like that everywhere. And it took so much pressure off of everything in my world. Like I'm unapologetic about who I am. I'm too old to care anymore. And so what happens, back to what I was telling you, is like when people come into my organization now, they know. They are very, very, very passionate about being a part of our world, our mission, what we're trying to do. And they care about my company as much as they care about, themselves. And because it's authentic all the way through. It's just, they've seen it the whole way. And when I don't care about doing that and pushing the envelope, because the way I see it, I'm winning either way. Either you're going to be attracted, wildly attracted to the best version of me, who I really am, or I'm absolutely going to repel you from the very beginning, and you were never going to do business with me anyway. So who cares? Let's just get it over with, right? And so,
And it's not an arrogance either. I think it's such a it's a it's just setting good expectations, right? I mean, everybody
well,
wants that.
it's about time. You know what it is? It's about time. I
Yeah.
don't want to waste yours, and I don't want to waste mine, right? I mean, my motto is the time is now. It's on my wrist. I don't wear a fancy watch. I wear this silly wristband that I have for 10 years, and I'll be damned if not every time I look at my wrist, that bitch is right? It's tattooed on my arm. It's on all over all the offices. I believe in making the most out of every single minute. I don't want to waste 1 minute of your time or my time on nonsense that's not in I'm not bringing value to your life. You're not bringing value to mine. It's not arrogance. It's nothing else. It's just that I clearly understand the value of time. And
How did you get that clearly convicted that this is a core principle of yours?
because one, losing a business, right? And realizing how much time I had wasted, moments I could not get back with my son, right? And things that I placed value on, that regardless of how much money I made, I could never buy it back. And that was very frustrating for me. And that if I had to do anything over again, that's what I would have done. Luckily, I got a second lease on life, and so my two daughters are, the benefactors of that, right? I mean, I soak up every moment of them, but I can't get that back with my son.
Mm-hmm.
Then I had my mentor, my uncle, who was, one of the most amazing men I've ever met, and he was a very successful executive in the travel industry, and had tens of millions of dollars when he retired, and had worked his entire life traveling the world, away from his family, away from his kids, doing everything to go build his empire. And then when he retired, shortly after he retired, and kind of finally reached this plateau, he's like, finally, I'm going to settle down and I'm going to start soaking up life. He got diagnosed with cancer. And, a few months, he suddenly was about to pass away. So I drove from Delray Beach, Florida to Daytona Beach, Florida. And my mom is on the phone telling me, you need to get here. And your uncle is, mind you, he's 60 years old. That's it.
Young. Yeah.
Calling me, and they're saying, he's hooked up to all the ventilators and everything. He's gone into the hospital with pneumonia. He's definitely going to die. And he's asking for you. You need to get here. And so I'm driving as fast as I possibly can down the Florida Turnpike, come in, and I'm running down the hallway like they're on the phone, like it's now, get here, and come into that room and see him all hooked up, just a shell of this giant of a man that I'd known my whole life and who had mentored me in business and in life in general. And watching him write out his last words on a whiteboard to me, a little handheld whiteboard, and basically say, I just wish I had more time. And that hit me like a ton of bricks, to understand that he embodied everything that I thought I wanted to be. He was super successful, was so well regarded in his industry. There's not anybody that could say one bad word about him. The only downside is he'd spent a ton of time away from his family, going and doing what he was passionate about. And all that money, tens of millions of dollars in the bank, the only thing he wanted, he couldn't buy. Didn't matter. He could have said, I'll give you $30 million right now if you give me 24 hours, and it ain't going to happen. And that was a huge, huge hit for me. And, shortly right after that, probably about within 6 months of that, maybe 8, I happened to be on an airplane flying back from an event from Memphis, Tennessee, back down to West Palm Beach, Florida, and connected through Atlanta. And my wife and my new young daughter, who was 5 at the time, had flown up to basically spend the weekend with me as I was putting on this live event. And because we booked our flights on different itineraries, they were seated apart from me on the plane. I'm sitting in 19A, they're in 26E and F. And as we're flying from Atlanta to West Palm, we're probably 45 minutes into the flight, maybe an hour, and the plane completely fills with smoke. And immediately all the buzzers come off. The stewardess comes on and says, is losing her mind, quite frankly. Exactly. The whole little thing where they do the hands, none of that shit happened. This was straight up like she was freaking out, right?
Yeah, those pictures don't do justice, right?
Yeah. And so She was completely freaking out on the plane. Crew, please return in your crew. Oh my God, this kind of stuff. And so you can imagine the panic that created in the plane. The buzzers are going off. The masks are dropping. This entire plane, inside of the plane, is filled with smoke. We go into a nosedive because I know this now. I didn't know it then at the time that they do that if they think the plane is on fire to try to put out a fire. And they diverted us to Tampa, Florida, to make an emergency landing. The captain comes on and tells us, when the crew is going to tell you to brace for impact, brace for impact, brace for impact. So this is a 15-minute ordeal that I'm summing up in about 30 seconds.
Which the 15 minutes seemed like
it was one of the most frightening things I've ever had. Everybody's screaming, but the only person I can hear screaming is my 5-year-old daughter screaming for daddy, and I can't get to her. Right? There's no way I can get back there to console her in any way. I'm having to hear my daughter scream in potentially her last moments. I'm looking at my wife, making eye contact, saying goodbye. I'm filming a video to my son that will be, hopefully, if somebody finds my phone, they'll know that he's thinking so when I tell you that this is real, baby. I mean, it doesn't get any more real. And of course, obviously, we're talking. And so fate would have it. We did make an emergency landing. We got on the ground. They ended up getting the plane, the fire that was in the baggage compartment. They didn't understand what was going on. They got us off the plane, and we drove. I never got back on that plane, although they wanted us to get back on it. I was like, that's not happening. Got rented a car and drove.
Yeah.
But I mean, those are 3 profound, life-changing events, right? Epic hits to the face where you're like, wait a minute, I can work my ass off and lose everything in a minute, right? Why not build something that matters? I can work my ass off and I will never be able to get back the time that I've wasted away from my family and friends and doing the things that actually matter. So not only can I lose it and it be gone, but I can build it and some tragedy hit me and it's all been at the expense of my family. It's never going to happen. And then, or I could be on an airplane at 30,000 feet and my life be over in a second and I still couldn't get any of it back. So I became very determined and intentional that I will absolutely not spend one moment wasted because I don't know when my next one's coming, right? Tomorrow's not promised, next week, next month. I live in a very finite world. I understand clearly that the clock is ticking and I'm not going to waste 1 minute. And so that's a huge, I think from an entrepreneurial standpoint, that is again, Steve Jobs made a comment that I thought was very good. It might even have been in that same address where he said that one of the best blessings that you could ever have is to remind yourself that you're going to die.
Isn't it interesting that Benjamin Franklin, his biography is amazing, and he said that 1 out of every 3 thoughts he would have is this could be the last moment, and it's kind of the stoicism. Stoics have that where it's like it's constant recalibration of what the hell is important right now.
It is. There's nothing more profound that I could share with your listeners than that. Is that we are conned into falling asleep at the wheel every day, right? Whether it is friends that are telling us, I'll get to it tomorrow, family, well, put your dreams off. You can probably do it next week, next month, next year. The media, the news, ripping away your power. Everything around you is designed to make you feel like you are not in control, when the exact opposite is true. You are in control of this moment. And that's it. And if you realize the awesome power that is, you will act and you will act accordingly, and that the next moment's not promised. And that has been a huge, huge aha for me in my life, because that's the fuel, right? When you have the motivation, the systems, the process, the knowledge, the desire, and then you put on top of that this willingness to not waste a moment of your life or build anything that doesn't matter, that doesn't bring value, that doesn't create impact, that doesn't allow you to spend more time with your kids and your wife and your husband or whoever it is, you're lethal at that point. Because it's not a matter of if you will be successful; it's just a matter of when.
Have you ever read the book Conversations with God?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. We probably don't have another hour for this conversation, but it's this. We talked about it at the beginning of the show, kind of relativity, right? Like, I mean, to be able to understand the opposite makes you truly understand and appreciate the journey, which is what you're talking about, right? Like, then you become addicted to the feedback loops of getting closer to who you are as an individual. I mean, it's like, and that resonates. So your story resonates with a lot with me like that, because it's not easy, but you kind of have an understanding of processing that moment and the time of, how you want to be more of yourself?
Well, here's the irony of all of it. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, go for it, man. This is awesome.
No, here's the irony of all of it is that when I started focusing on that, my businesses became infinitely more successful by a factor, right? Uh, what I figured out is that when I chase money, money runs. When I'm focused on the dollar, I can go create the dollars, but I can create them quickly and in short, in short order. When I start focusing on me, my family, the thing bringing value to the world, really trying to create impact in the world, the avalanche of success that ultimately landed in my lap and ultimately finding my passion and something that my purpose, I cannot even overestimate it, even if I tried. It's shocking how profound these things that we've discussed kind of stacked up, right? Like I understand time, I understand my core principles, I understand what really matters to me, and I execute in that box very efficiently.
So when you think about your uncle and he's sitting there, obviously knowing that time is finite, like what is your desire? I mean, if you're living life backwards from the eulogy, I mean, the fact that you talked about conversation with God, I mean, like what is it? Because if you're okay at any moment that this is gone, how are you measuring the impact and the dent that you made in the world?
Really simple. I mean, and I think about it every day, right? Because I get asked a version of that question a lot, like, why clearly you got it all, you got a lot of stuff going on that's really successful. Why do you still go as hard as you go? It's important for me, for my kids to see me struggle. It's important for my kids to see me build. It's important for me to demonstrate to them, not talk about it, to demonstrate it, what it looks like to fight for a dream.
Yep.
And I know that impact that creates on their life, because that's exactly what happened with my father. That's what he did for me. And as tough as that was, my father and I had a very tumultuous relationship most of my life. At the end of the day, that's a huge gift, and I can't take it away from it. But I would gauge success by one simple measure. And again, this is what I think about. About 2 or 3 years ago, I had a couple different friends that passed away for a variety of circumstances, heart attack, car crash, whatever. And I remember there was one young lady that was an amazing woman, and she meant enough to me that I got on a plane and I flew to Las Vegas to show my condolences to her family, right? And I had that thought, like, have I done enough in the world? Have I created enough impact in the world where somebody would actually get on a plane and fly? Because in the other cases, the 2 or 3 other people, I didn't do that, right? And so I'm observing, like, why would I do that here and not do that there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so to me, if I was to pass today, have I done enough in the world? Have I created enough impact? Have I had enough impact on people's lives in a profound way where they are compelled to take a break, get on a plane, fly in here, and make sure that they walked up to my little girls to shake their hands and say, "Your dad mattered." And any day that I don't think I'm up to that, that just means I got to keep going. I got to keep pushing, right? That's what I'm striving for. I'm striving to make sure that there's somebody out there that I was able to rattle their cage enough, give them enough information, enough insight, enough wisdom, enough tools that they feel like, man, this guy, whether I actually knew them or not, they feel so compelled that I have got to go and show my respect. And if I had the, opportunity to watch that from above, that would be a situation where I would say, that's a life well lived. You did good. You did okay.
The beauty of the world that we live in, too, Ken, is you don't need billions of dollars to do that.
No.
Yeah, what you just said is just focusing on the right things, and that's like what you had said is we're conned into believing that we're not in control, but like you said, like that's not the case at all. Like it's just
and quite frankly, the biggest con artist of them all is you. You sit there and you tell yourself the self-talk you have. If you realize the way your brain actually operates, it has your analytical side of your brain has got one function. It is to survival.
Yeah.
Make sure you don't die. So anytime you're trying to
serve calories and don't die.
Anytime you're trying to get out of your comfort zone, do something that is extraordinary, that feels a little painful. We all have that voice in our head, like, what the hell are you doing? Don't do this. What? Don't back up. Learning how to control that voice and understand what it is, and that fighting through that fear is really, it's everything.
I just interviewed Todd Herman from the Alter Ego Effect. I don't know if you ever read that book. Yeah. If you got to make up your hero and put that on, it's
one of the most powerful words you can take out of your vocabulary is the word can't or cannot, right? Just don't say it, because you can do anything. The moment, When somebody sits there and tells me I can't, I'm like, no, let's just be honest with each other. More importantly, you be honest with yourself because you're the one that's always listening to the words coming out of your mouth. Just replace that word with I choose not to, because that's really what you're doing. This is not, it's a choice. Like I can't is not real. There are certain cases where it's certainly real. Like I can't go run a 4 minute mile. I get it, right? But could I absolutely choose to train for the next 2 years of my life and then get to a 4 minute mile? Probably.
Yeah.
So to me, anything is possible. You just got to be honest with yourself. Using stupid, silly language saying, I can't, oh, I can't make the time to go get in shape. I can't make the time to do this. No, no, no. Replace it with the right words. Be honest with yourself. I'm choosing differently. I'm choosing not to do this. When you start doing that to guys like us, that doesn't feel good. Because now all of a sudden you realize, oh, that's the control I'm talking about. Like, oh, wait a minute. It's a lot easier to act like I'm not in control and be the victim than it is to actually own up that I'm in control and I get a choice here.
So that's this perfect lead into, as we're wrapping this up, I got two last questions. One is, what does the word intentional mean to you?
Understanding the direction that you're trying to go or the destination you're trying to achieve, starting with the end in mind and being very deliberate with the steps and actions you take to get there. Nothing is chance.
I love it. Yes. Amen, brother. What is the best place for people to find your new book, all the information that you're out there, your training, all the stuff that you're doing?
I mean, I'm easy to find on all the social channels. It's just at Kent Clothier, right? KentClothier. Or you can go to kentclothier.com. Or if you want the new book, just go to grabkentsbook.com and you can grab it. It's right there. Available on Amazon, baby.
This has been an absolute blast, Ken. I can't thank you enough, man.
No, man. Thanks for having me. This has been great.